The aftermath of the Battle of Drowley. The first thing Sanda did after being resuscitated was vomit all over herself. The second thing she did was to vomit all over again. Her body shook, trembling with the remembered deceleration of her gunship breaking apart around her, stomach roiling as the preservation foam had encased her, shoving itself down her throat and nose and any other ready orifice. Her teeth jarred together, her fingers fumbled with temporary palsy against the foam stuck to her face. Dios, she hoped the shaking was temporary. They told you this kind of thing happened in training, that the trembling would subside and the explosive evacuation cease. But it was a whole hell of a lot different to be shaking yourself senseless while emptying every drop of liquid from your body than to be looking at a cartoonish diagram with friendly letters claiming mild gastrointestinal discomfort. It wasn't foam covering her. She scrubbed, mind numb with cold sleep, struggling to figure out what encased her. It was slimy and goopy and, oh no. Sanda cracked a hesitant eyelid and peeked at her fingers. Thick, clear jelly with slight bluish tinge coated her hands. The stuff was cold, making her trembling worse, and with a sinking gut she realized what it was. She joked about the stuff in training with her fellow gunshippers. Snail snot. Gelatinous splooge. But its real name was Medicist Incubatory Nutribath, and you only got dunked in it if you needed intensive care with a capital I. Fuck, she tried to say, but her throat rasped on unfamiliar air. How long had she been in here? Sanda opened both eyes, ignoring the cold gel running into them. She lay in a white enameled cocoon, the lid removed to reveal a matching white ceiling inlet with true white bulbs. The brightness made her blink. The Nutribath was draining, and now that her chest was exposed to air, the shaking redoubled. Gritting her teeth against the spasms, she felt around the cocoon, searching for a handhold. "Hey, Medis," she called, then hacked up a lump of gel. "Got a live one in here!" No response. Assholes were probably waiting to see if she could get out under her own power. Could she? She didn't remember being injured in the battle, but the Medis didn't stick you in a bath for a laugh. She gave up her search for handholds and fumbled trembling hands over her body, seeking scars. The baths were good, but they wouldn't have left a gunnery sergeant like her in the tub long enough to fix cosmetic damage. The gunk was only slightly less expensive than training a new gunner. Her face felt whole, chest and shoulders smaller than she remembered, but otherwise unharmed. She tried to crane her neck to see down her body, but the unused muscles screamed in protest. "Can I get some help over here?" she called out, voice firmer now that she'd cleared it of the gel. Still no answer. Sucking down a few sharp breaths to steel herself against the ache, she groaned and lifted her torso up on her elbows until she sat straight, legs splayed out before her. Most of her legs, anyway. Sanda stared, trying to make her cold sleep-dragging brain catch up with what she saw. Her left leg was whole, if covered in disturbing wrinkles, but the right? That ended just above the place where her knee should have been. Tentatively, she reached down, brushed shaking fingers over the thick lump of flesh at the end of her leg. She remembered. A coil, fired by an Icarian railgun, had smashed through the pilot's deck, slamming a nav panel straight into her legs. The evac pod chair she'd been strapped into had immediately deployed preserving foam, encasing her in her smashed leg for Ada Prime scoopers to pluck out of space after the chaos of the Battle of Drowley faded. She picked at her puckered skin, stunned. Remembered pain vibrated through her body and she clenched her jaw. Some of that cold she felt upon awakening must have been leftover shock from the injury. Her body frozen in a moment of panic. And that, my friends, is how we begin in Velocity Weapon by Megan O'Keefe. And this book was a buddy read I did as part of Space Opera September, and I read it with RK Stumbling Bear, whose channel you should definitely check out. I'll have it linked down below. She does some great things. Just recently reviewed Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Many of you have read that already. I can tell from the number of people who have talked about it. I'm not one of them. I have not read it yet. But I have read Velocity Weapon. This is book 1 in a series. And I suppose the best thing I can tell you in recommendation for this came from my buddy reader's response when she got to the very end of the book. And that was, she was mad that her library didn't have book 2 immediately available to go and check out. And I tend to agree. I think this was a really fun book. It ends in a way that is both satisfactory to the storyline, yet also opens things up to where you immediately want to go and check out what happens next, which is the perfect type of book ending and resolution. There are three different points of view. The primary one being Sanda, who you saw there, waking up from a nutribath and vomiting all over the place and realizing she's missing part of her leg, which is something that you don't see very often from a main character protagonist in a story, is somebody who is missing a limb of some sort and has to try to get over the adaptation process of dealing with life without that piece of their limb. And it does play a pretty important part for Sanda. And she finds out really, really early on, so this isn't spoilers. Um, you would know this by about page 30, I think, if not sooner. She wakes up on the ship, and it's been hundreds of years since that battle. So everybody that she knew, she loved, is dead, and the planet where she used to live has been destroyed. And then the second point of view is her brother. So back shortly after the battle, he's what's known as a keeper, and they have these little chips where they store highly classified information. And it's a pretty political sect that takes lead for the people of that planet. So he is one of them. And so you travel along with him and his perspective in the aftermath of the battle and how everything plays out against this rival planetary system. And you learn about gates, which are how they're able to do such interstellar travel. And these keepers are the ones that have the knowledge of how to build those, stored, and being able to pass that down. And then the third perspective is a kind of almost a street urchin type of bandit, almost of sorts. A little gang that pulls a heist. They live in the slums. They're not wealthy by any means, and they go on a heist that doesn't go quite as expected. And it's not clear for the vast majority of the book how that perspective intertwines with the other two. But I can tell you that there is a point where they do come together, which was very satisfying to see. And that's part of what led into opening up all kinds of questions leading into book two that you're just like, well, I need to know more now. Velocity Weapon was a fun read. It is packaged and promoted as being space battles and intergalactic politics, and it does succeed on one of those two. There are not really space battles, not in the sense that you would think. You get more of hints of battles happening in space rather than there actually being any action via those space battles, which is disappointing a little bit. I didn't even realize it was advertising as that until afterwards. When looking on Goodreads and looking at reviews and seeing that it is being advertised as having dazzling space battles, and that isn't very true. But as a whole, I did enjoy this. This is I believe, Megan O'Keefe's first debut novel. I could be wrong about that. But it is, it says from a major new voice in science fiction. So I'm assuming, based on that this is her first book. And it was a good one. It was interesting. It's got some really wild twists that will come up along the way that aren't really expected and are really, really interesting to see come alive on the page. So I want to avoid having this be a super long review. As a whole, I give Velocity Weapon 4.5 stars, roughly. Not quite a 5, but definitely more than a 4. It was a really good read. I enjoyed it a lot. I plan to continue the series. Probably not right away because I've got other series that I want to continue that are higher up on that priority list. Had I found book 2 in my travels and my bookstore tour yesterday, I probably would have picked it up because I did enjoy it. I didn't even see book 1 available. But yeah, if you like space opera, if you like intrigue and politics, if you like unraveling some mysteries, it does have that. It's got some interesting characters. It follows some fun characters in there. It's got some really interesting plot. So if you're a plot reader, you're probably going to like this. If you're a character reader, like I am, I liked this a lot too, because Sanda is a very interesting character, and her whole plot line is very dynamic and interesting. Easily the most interesting of the three, followed closely by the heist gone wrong, even though that doesn't play nearly as major of a part. So, as I started with my last review, I'm going to read a 1-star review and a 5-star review to close this down. So Mike, in 2019, rated it 1 star and says, "There are no dazzling space battles, so let's get that bit of disinformation out of the way. This is a fragmented, boring story which tells of 3 main characters by swapping between them in alternating chapters. None of the chapters is long enough to get you hooked, and so there's a constant feel of interruption. There's also the annoying piece of setting up cliffhangers at the end of many chapters that you pretty soon realize come to nothing and are the equivalent of clickbait. Basically, with very little inherent knowledge, Megan has chucked every sci-fi cliche under the sun at this novel in an unsatisfying and tedious way. You care nothing about any of the thinly drawn characters, and absolutely nothing is resolved at the end of the book. There are just more questions about what is really going on. As if you could care less. My biggest gripe is that for a story set in the far future, Megan has not got the imagination to stop her characters spewing 21st century phrases and technology we are barely beyond. iPad, food, entertainment, and politics also all feel remarkably unimaginative. When on a planet far away, in 1500 years' time, we are still using Velcro and manila paper folders, you know this author has not gotten into the chops to go anywhere near sci-fi. Dreadful." Sure, fair. Read my commentary on historical fiction. I'm not going to nitpick as much about accuracy and imagination there. Do I want to see more imaginative details? Sure. It's always fun to see what they picture. But also having something with a foot planted in the familiar helps the reader to get into the story and envision it with a lot less of a barrier to get into that. So I can understand why there isn't a ton of wild technology. So now the 5-star review from Nils. And it's a long one, so buckle up. "Ada Prime's Casimir Gate filled the sky. Only from this position, she thought, can one truly appreciate the gate's beauty. It was massive beyond her ability to articulate. Even Keeper Station, so large it housed hundreds of thousands, barely managed to eclipse a small stretch of the ring that was the frame of the gate. The light of it had always been Ada's guiding star. Velocity Weapon is the first book in the Protectorate series by Megan O'Keefe. Hailed as a book that will provide dazzling space battles and intergalactic politics, you can see why this one has been on my radar for quite some time now. So, was it all I hoped it would be? Hell yes, and it was so much more. It's hard for me to describe the plot of Velocity Weapon because I don't want to unwittingly give away any spoilers, or even any clues as to how the narrative unfolds. Let it be known, though, O'Keefe will take you down paths you were never expecting. So I'll just mention that the book begins with our main protagonist, Sanda, waking up on board an enemy spaceship 230 years in the future. Sanda is not alone, though. Not by any means. You see, the ship is actually a sentient AI who calls himself Biro. Our second main protagonist is Biren, Sanda's younger brother. His timeline focuses back on the moments when the enemy Icarian declare war upon his homeland planet Ada Prime. As Icarian unleashes their attack on Prime, Biren searches desperately for his sister. I've stated before that I'm not a big fan of space opera, and that I'm also not overly fond of long scenes where characters are confined on board a spaceship. I tend to prefer my sci-fi to be centered around a planet and have culture, religion, and alien life explored. If you think in terms of Dune Saga, which is one of my favorites, then you'll understand my type of sci-fi that I mean. However, Megan O'Keefe made me eat my words because I adored this little gem of a space opera. Yes, we do explore intergalactic politics through the conflict between Icarian and Eta Prime, and also through the concept of keepers, who held the secret of intergalactic traveling through gates. We also touch upon philosophy shown through the natures of AIs. But ultimately, Velocity Weapon is a space romp which revels in its 100% fun factor. I believe that O'Keefe creates a fantastic balance between an intriguing plot which constantly keeps you on your toes and a fantastic array of charismatic characters. Take Sanda, for example. She is a character that drips with charm and feistiness. She's not one who wallows in self-pity or gives in to despair. No, not our Sanda. She sees a problem, she finds a solution, even if the solution may be ludicrous. Damn the risks, damn the consequences. Let's do this. I have to say I hold such a soft spot for these ballsy types of characters. I'll skip a bit. Often, with the sci-fi genre, I find myself struggling to fully immerse myself because I get tied in knots over trying to understand and visualize all the world building, particularly the technology. Did I understand all of the techie space terms in Velocity Weapon? Nope. Did I care? Not one bit. When the book is so well done, it is not understanding every single detail ceases to matter. So although I may have had certain terms go over my head, O'Keefe never left me bewildered either. I found the prose created a cinematographic. I don't even know why I can't say the word. Read. Every scene was so well crafted, and there was this ultra real feeling. You could visualize it, like a film playing out on the page. That's not what I read about this. Or should do. Speaking of well crafted, I love it when authors pay attention and include little details, especially in the chapter titles. Naturally, I very much enjoyed the humorous chapter titles that were included. Surviving Day 40 would be super. Naps are never long enough. And the wisdom of repair bots were ones that really stood out to me. So to sum up, reading Velocity Weapon felt like being strapped into our very own spaceship and being on one exhilarating, fun ride. Megan O'Keefe, I salute you. You are one damn deliciously thrilling, tricksy author. So there you have it, two sides of the coin. And I tend to align a lot more with that 5-star review for some of the same reasons. You don't ever feel overwhelmed by the sciencey, techy, spacey stuff. So if you're not well versed in science fiction, you can get into this one and not feel overwhelmed. It is actiony at times, intriguing at times. It's got good politics. The main character Sanda is stuck on a ship by herself for quite some time, and it's a long ways into the book before she gets off of the ship itself. So she spends the vast majority of the book on this one ship in that one location, and that's okay because the characters are interesting, the plot is riveting, and the chapter titles, I will agree, are fantastic. They're delightful. So if you haven't, check out Velocity Weapon. I do highly recommend it for lovers of space opera sci-fi, and for those that maybe aren't as into science fiction but want somewhere to try out. This wouldn't be a terrible spot after you do Ender's Game, because Ender's Game is always my first and foremost sci-fi recommendation. But Velocity Weapon is a great one as well. So there you have it. Hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you read it and how you feel about the book.